Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, hopefully you're having an amazing day. Let's kick this video off discussing DDR5, specifically the fact that it's going to be the only memory standard that AMD will be supporting with the Ryzen 7000 series, at least according to some new rumours that have been circulating on the internet. Now I want to say right up front that this is personally what I've been hearing too from pretty much all of my sources, but there is some documentation that has been now obtained and leaked online, and basically if you look through the documentation, pretty much multiple references have been made to DDR5 and literally zero for DDR4. This is contrary to something like Intel's Alder Lake, which of course does support DDR5 as well as DDR4, depending on the motherboard variant that you choose to opt for. This means that you can go with, say, a DDR4 board along with reasonably inexpensive DDR4 memory and get a pretty decent time. So yeah, AMD are not utilizing this same strategy with Ryzen 7000, and I feel that one of the reasons behind this, honestly, is because of the next generation APUs, along with a ton of new technologies that they will be implementing within their processors, and we'll be discussing one of those in just a moment. I do think this could be a little frustrating, but obviously the more products which support DDR5, the more DDR5 memory kits which are on the market, yada yada yada, the cheaper the memory actually becomes over time. And yeah, I mean, ultimately speaking, Ryzen 7000 is going to be a really fast, but you know, a lot of folks may not want to jump on the platform anyway initially because of teething problems. You know, just about every platform when it first launches has an issue or two, so perhaps also by the time most people start adopting the platform anyway, memory will be even cheaper. And yeah, so one of the really cool pieces of new technology for Ryzen 7000 is faster memory overclocking. So memory overclocking, of course, is nothing new to just about any modern CPU or even older CPU, actually, to be really honest with you. But we've been actually hearing this year about a technology called AMD RAMP, which stands for Ryzen Accelerated Memory Profile. But there's a very interesting trademark with the name AMD Expo. You can, of course, see some images on screen right now. I'd like to thank videocards.com for this discovery. Now, what's quite interesting about this as well is the timing of this, because Joseph Tao, who is an employee over at AMD, was actually discussing memory overclocking just recently. He said, and I quote, "Our first DDR5 platform for gaming is going to be our Raphael platform. And one of the awesome things about Raphael is that we're going to really be able to make a big splash with overclocking." I'm just going to kind of leave it there, but speeds that you wouldn't be thought possible may be possible with this overclocking spec, end quote. There aren't a ton of details exactly how this is going to be achieved, but I suspect that hardcore overclockers are going to be particularly interested in this, those who really like to set records. It's for perhaps just the average person, quote unquote. It'll also be really curious to see how memory speeds and timings affect the Zen 4 processors. Obviously, you know, DDR5 is much faster in terms of the actual clock frequency, the MTS rate of the memory, but in terms of timings, it's much looser. So it'll be really interesting to see how all of this stuff scales. And one final little piece of news for today, there's actually yet another benchmark of Intel Arc, and this is a very interesting benchmark. I want to give a credit to 3D Center actually on Twitter for this discovery. I will leave a link to it in the video description. However, I came across this via hardwaretimes.com, so I'll also leave a link to, of course, their article in the video description. And you can see that the system was being tested with an i5 9600K, so it's certainly not the most powerful processor out there, but it's not, you know, terrible or anything like that. And the GPU which was being used is an Intel Arc A770 GPU. Now, this is not the highest end GPU possible. So in terms of specifications, this is one of the highest end GPUs that Intel Arc actually will feature. So the A770 features 4096 FP32 cores, or if you prefer Intel speak, that is 32xe cores. Now, the A770 actually has two variants, according to some information that's been leaked by Komachi. One is an 8GB variant and one is a 16GB variant. Allegedly, there's also an A780LE or limited edition card. I assume that's probably going to be much the same, albeit with higher clock frequencies. And this will basically feature a 256-bit bus for both. But, as you probably guessed, we're looking at basically half the memory capacity. So what we essentially have here is representing one of the highest end GPUs in Intel's allotment. And we can see the overall score is 500. And if we compare that to a couple of comparable results here from an RTX 2060 and also an AMD RX 5700 XT, well, I don't really need to tell you guys the difference. Essentially, it's getting spanked. There are, some scores it's a little closer in than others, but essentially speaking, it's not performing as well. Now, there are some caveats here, though, before everyone starts going ballistic. Caveat number one is this is not necessarily representative of gaming benchmarks. The second thing, and this is perhaps the most important, is we don't know what state these drivers are in versus the state that drivers are in for their latest iteration, which is being available to developers right now. And also we do not know the state of drivers which actually ends up going to end users. And the final thing is that we also don't know other things, quote unquote, which are going around, which are simultaneously happening or are occurring with the system. For all we know, it's doing this, like running this, but also simultaneously trying to calculate the size of the universe on other GPU cores. I'm just obviously being a little silly. My point is that we don't know all of the stuff that's happening. I will say that for quite a long time, I have been told that the drivers for Intel Arc are the problem, and I don't want to go into the whole spiel again because I've mentioned it several times at this point in videos. So I will say that I do feel eventually Intel will work these problems out, but yeah, it's quite alarming at this point. I mean, what are we in? Late April. So if they do hit the Q2 result, the Q2 release date, it's going to be really interesting. With that said, thank you very much for checking out the video. If you've enjoyed it, you know what to do. It's YouTube land. And I will see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.